So keep watch on oil prices throughout the course of Asian trade. Let's bring in Jeff Powell now. He's CIO of Polaris Wealth Advisors. Now, they have an AUM of about $1 billion, and he joins us live out of San Francisco this morning. Jeff, let's go first to the performance of U.S. equity markets. This was an interesting dynamic playing out stateside. The NASDAQ hitting a record high, but the Dow and the S&P 500 slipping. How would you characterize the session?
Well, we've actually had a really interesting first half of the year. You've actually had large cap growth stocks outperforming large cap value stocks so far the first half of the year by over 10%. Since this has been tracked going all the way back to 1979, this is the second largest disparity between those. So what you've got going on with the NASDAQ compared to the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones is really a lot of non-dividend paying companies, and a lot of those companies are reliant on more of their income coming from abroad sources than domestic, and obviously being driven by the weaker dollar right now. For investors that are domestic to the United States as an investor, the technology sector looks very strong right now. I mean, the weakening dollar with a market that sells more than 60% of its goods abroad really is making that a very attractive place within the United States as a domestic investor to be investing in.
Let's talk about the oil patch as well. We saw prices getting a modest pop out of the headlines out of this major meeting in St. Petersburg in Russia. Saudi Arabia, the de facto leader of the OPEC cartel, deciding to limit oil exports by 6.6 million barrels in August. How significant is that? And secondly, where do you see oil prices going towards year end?
Well, I think that you might see oil prices drift up. I mean, obviously, they're at the kind of the lower end of where they've been fluctuating throughout the year. I don't really see them really getting much above $60 a barrel at the very most at any point in time over the next few years. Where it ends this year really obviously depends a lot to do with what we're seeing going on in China as well as Europe. If we start to see some of the global demand start to pick up, and if we see production stay down, then you'll definitely see a price movement in oil. But right now, what we're seeing is any time that oil kind of drifts above 50, you get people to start to drift from the agreement to begin with and cheat on it, or you start seeing a lot of the producers within the United States turn on the tap and start producing more oil at a price that's making more sense from a profitability standpoint. So there's a lot of pressure forcing prices down within oil to really keep them down for some time now.
It was interesting because we saw oil prices move higher, even though the USD and Treasury yields as well saw a modest pop in the US session. So just your thoughts on the dollar. Where do you think the USD is going, and can this recent resilience be maintained into the upcoming Fed meeting?
You know, I think that obviously the Fed meeting has little to do with what's going on with the dollar. I mean, the Federal Reserve has been raising rates, and you've seen the dollar weaken during the course of this year so far, with the dollar going from a 104 to 1 ratio against the euro all the way up to 116 where it is right now, even with the Federal Reserve raising rates. I think it has a lot to do with what's going on from an economic standpoint, really with what's going on with Europe. A lot of the stimulus starting to pick up, a lot of the economy starting to pick up in a lot of the larger economies. I think that's much more to do with what's going on with a weakening of the dollar to euro than anything else. The Federal Reserve raising rates, I mean, they raised rates in June and it didn't have any impact on stopping the weakness there. Future weakness within the dollar, I mean, I think that we've seen a good amount of what we're going to see with regards to the weakness within the euro to dollar ratio. You could see a little bit more leakage, but I do not expect to see us go anywhere close to where we were a few years ago.
Jeff, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for helping us get set up for the Asian trading day ahead. We appreciate your analysis. That's Jeff Powell there from Polaris. Great
My
stuff.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Moving on now, and US President Donald Trump has called on Republicans to keep their promise to put an end to Obamacare. Let's bring